You're listening to the Hella Well with Danielle show, a podcast taking women of color on a journey exploring all things wellness and travel related. We're all about showing you how to put on your oxygen mask first and creating lasting self-care habits that will free you to travel the world and live the life you truly desire, and not one you have to fake loving. I'm your host, Danielle Washington. Now let's buckle up and start this journey. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Hella Well with Danielle podcast. I am your host, Danielle Washington, and I needed a break recently. I have notoriously just said, I need a break, and I'm just jumping on a plane to anywhere. I've done it to where I'm like, I just feel like going somewhere. Oh, one perfect time was I was supposed to go to Tahiti, missed my flight. Bad story. Not even going to go there in the bad story, but I was like, I'm not sitting here. So within less than 4 hours of missing my flight, I booked a flight to Thailand and Japan. And so I'm notorious for doing this. My friends know this about me. And I thought about it. I'm like, a lot of people don't probably know exactly how to go about booking a last minute trip. And so I was like, why don't I come in here and talk about how to book a last minute trip? What are the tips and tricks and things that I have known that has worked for me, what has worked for me mentally in making sure that this trip can be the best trip possible. So that's what we're here talking about. So recently I went to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, which I had never been to. It's funny because when I think of Puerto Vallarta, I think of the Love Boat. Yes, I'm totally dating myself, but I'm like, it's the Love Boat destination. It had never crossed my mind as a place to go. I had never thought about it. I've gone many different places, and low-key, I'm not really a fan of Mexico until this trip. But I've never been a fan of Mexico. Mexico was just Mexico. Not saying it's bad. I'm saying every place, there's a place for everyone, and it wasn't the place for me. But I was like, okay. As a caregiver, my parents booked this last minute trip on a cruise, and I was free for once. I didn't have to worry like, oh, do I need to take them to a doctor's appointment? Do I need to be there for them? Do I need to do something for them? I could think and pour into myself. And it was a moment where I'm like, yeah, wait, sis, you can pour into yourself. So what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? So the first thing I always tell people when you are booking a last minute trip is go with the flow. And that means in absolutely everything that you're doing, especially when it's like last minute is in, I'm booking a flight to leave tomorrow. There's different ways you can travel. If you are traveling within there's called the 14-day rule, a lot of airlines and hotels and whatever have a discount if you're booking before 14 days. And so keep that in mind if that's something you want to do. But if you're like me and there ain't no 14 days that you have 1 day, you got to be flexible. And you got to be flexible with your destination. And so this trip, perfect example. I was like, okay, where do I want to go? Okay, I know that I don't want to go too far because I didn't have a lot of time. I had a short window. I was going, my idea was to go through a couple different days. I could be gone 3 or 4 days. It was my plan. So if I'm going to be gone 3 or 4 days, I don't want to go too far. So I had to look what location it has a short flight. So I'm looking at flights that are 3 to 5 hours max. Unless the location is bomb, maybe 8 hours. But that ruled out me going to Asia. That ruled me going out to Europe, me going to Tahiti, me going to Africa, all out because the flights were going to be too long. So consider how long do you want to be on a flight, because that's cutting into your travel time and your time to relax and woosah. So that was the first thing. So I was like, okay, I got to look at the flights that are short. So where can I go that were short? From California, from San Francisco. I sometimes wish I was in places like Atlanta or Houston or DC or New York, because I feel like you have so many different options in short flight distance. I feel like San Francisco just feels like we don't have as many. And the flights aren't as cheap as going from Los Angeles. I don't know why that's the case, but I always feel like low-key Los Angeles has better flight deals. I'm kind of mad at you about Los Angeles, but I love where I live. So was looking at where can I go. First looked at Costa Rica because I'm like, oh, I really want to go back to Costa Rica. It was the last place I went to before the pandemic. And mind you, this was my first trip that wasn't business related since COVID. So this was the first time I was getting back into the groove of Danielle traveling the way Danielle has always traveled. And I was excited. So I was like, I want to go back to Costa Rica because it had my heart. It made me feel good when I was there. Costa Rica was raining. Everything I looked, every different location, I looked at both sides, looked at the Caribbean side, the Pacific side, and they both said rain. I'm like, do I really want to go somewhere beautiful and use my time away to be in the rain where I couldn't really enjoy location? So Costa Rica was out. I looked at Puerto Rico. I like Puerto Rico, and the flights are in at least the 8-hour range. And again, nope, rain. I looked at Cuba, rain. I looked at Colombia, rain. I looked at, what was it? I looked at Tulum and Cancun area because I was like, oh, why not? Mexico is short. I don't really care for Cabo. And so I'm like, I'm not going to Cabo. I'm like, I'd rather stay here than go to Cabo. I don't know. I just don't like Cabo. It's a beautiful location that just feels dead. And not dead as in boring or whatever. Just there's just something soulless about Cabo. Again, I feel like travel is like art. It's an eye of the beholder. And then these two beautiful eyes that I think are beautiful. Cabo just energetically feels dead to me. And it just doesn't give me that yes vibe. And I just didn't want to go. And then I thought about going to Tulum and Cancun because, there's a large, the Playa del Carmen, there's a large, community of Black expats there. I was like, this will be fire. I can connect with some other people. This would be good. There's some good spots over there. Not normally a place I would want to go, but I was like, oh, maybe I can do this. I think so. It didn't matter. Rain. Rain, 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 rain. Every single place I looked was rain. And I'm like, dang, there is nowhere to go. And I didn't want to stay in the U.S. I was really intentional that I want to use my passport. Back in the day, pre-COVID days, I would get antsy if I hadn't used my passport like within a month or 60 days time. So I just needed to use my passport because I hadn't used my passport since my trip to Morocco, where I took 40 women on a trip to Morocco with one of my clients. So I needed to go somewhere. So I kept looking, kept thinking. There's a couple different ways I normally would do this. Normally I would look at a map and try to map it out. And sometimes I use the map in one of the apps I use. So one of the places I use to look for flights is called Momondo. And sometimes I'll use that. But this time I just use my Google map and I'm just looking on my phone. I'm like looking at the world. I'm like, where can I go? What looks like it's in 3 hours time frame. And I was like zooming in and zooming out. And then I saw Puerto Vallarta. I was like, wait, my cousin went there one time and she said she really liked the beaches there. She said it was really clean. And I was like, the Love Boat always went there. Let's see what the weather's like. No rain, 80 degrees. I was like, okay, first step, destination. I had picked a destination that had what I needed. I needed to not have rain. I needed to have a beach, and I needed to be in 3 hours. It's 3 hours and 20 minutes to get here and back from San Francisco to Puerto Vallarta. So I was like, bet, perfect. The next part is price, and this can be up to you. For me, I was open to the price. I mean, oftentimes I'm like, it needs to be under $300 or it needs to be under $500. But this time I was like, this is extraordinary last minute. So I had to recognize, again, with everything going on in the world, gas prices being high, the price might have been high. But nope, price was $300. And it was like $300. I'm like, I could totally do this. $300, 3 hours away. It's meeting all of the things I needed. And then so what did I do? So what did I do in terms of finding a flight? So again, I mentioned Momondo, and I'll put this in the show notes. Momondo is one of my favorite apps for looking for flights. And I also it's a lie, but I oftentimes will use Google Chrome, and I'll do it in a window under incognito. So when I'm looking back and forth, because I will research myself to death in going back and forth and, will this airline go good? Like, what about this? And this is the same thing with with hotels. And so I'm always researching, and I don't want the system to kind of know who I am to jack up the prices because they know I'm doing this. So oftentimes I will use the incognito window with this. So Momondo is great. Momondo is one of the sites I use to look for flights. I don't always book through Momondo because they have all these different low fare companies that they kind of show pricing for. Some of them I just don't feel comfortable booking through. Some of them do. And so I just am kind of sometimes leery about booking through some of the companies that they recommend. That being said, I also use Skyscanner. I know some people use Google Flights. I know that people sometimes will, oftentimes previously where I've looked for deals is I'll look at, there's different travel sites that have many, many different deals that go on all the time. I used to get these amazing WhatsApp messages. I still do, but not as much as I used to. That would give me all this information about, glitch fares and cheap fares. Like I just got one, I think yesterday for Ghana. And it was for $600 from DC or somewhere else, somewhere on the East Coast. I'm like, this is dirt cheap. But I'm not in the mood. Not in the mood to go to Ghana. It wasn't something I was ready to buy. But I've seen many different things. Another example, a friend told me about a flight deal from here to Tahiti, $500, dirt cheap. Thought about it, but just didn't jump on it. I was going to jump on it, and then just kind of got busy. Wish I had it because it would have been the same time that this situation here was. But again, I wasn't planning on traveling at the time. So Skyscanner, Momondo, Google Flights. If you are not planning last minute, there's all these different sites you can check to help you get great deals so you can plan a little further in advance. If you're traveling last minute, these are the places I like. I like looking at Skyscanner. I often will sometimes use Skyscanner just because I feel like I trust them a little bit more in terms of booking things. And what I love about Skyscanner and Momondo is they'll give you split situations. So my situation was I booked the flight on United going out, and I booked the flight on Alaska coming back. And so I'm using two different airlines because oftentimes when I if you looked for coming back and forth using United or Alaska, the times didn't work for me. And so I had to make sure the times worked for me. And I was looking at times that were, I get there, I could leave early morning or late at night and get there, early. So I'm not missing out on much of the day. So I like to travel at times where I'm not doing anything anyway, or travel late at night. So where I'm getting kind of back where I'm back in a certain time frame. So I look for certain time frames. But the other thing about it was when I looked at United, the flights for going back and forth were way more than $300. And I was like, no, I don't want to. I want to stay in my $300 range. And once I found the $300 range, I was like, okay, let's find the perfect timing for me. The United Alaska mix worked out perfectly because I was able to leave early morning, get there by, I think I got there by 2, which is a perfect time to check in. Because sometimes if you get there too early, you can't check in. So you need to also consider those type of things. Like, what are you going to do with your bags? I knew if I got there around 2, that meant that by the time I got to my place, I could definitely check in, start my day, bada boom, bada bang, get it in, get it out. Love that. And so those are the tips I use for airlines. Now, in terms of accommodations, it depends on where I'm going. I sometimes like booking and staying in hotels, but a lot of times I like staying in Airbnbs or finding something creative, or for this trip, I was looking at retreat locations. What I will say as a last minute tip is, again, going back to being flexible, be flexible about your stays. You don't always have to stay at the exact same location. For this trip, stayed at more than one location just because it worked out better for me to do that. I also wanted to try different things. I was looking at, retreats. So for me, I'm looking at potentially doing a retreat in Puerto Vallarta after being there. And I'm like, bet. So it made sense for me to stay in more than one place. So in that being said, when I'm looking at hotels, I will use a site like booking.com. Granted, there's 50 million of these sites. I like booking.com because I feel like I like their reviews. I may not always book through them, but I like reading through the reviews. We'll look at TripAdvisor, but TripAdvisor, the way that it's set up, some days I'm like, this is blowing me. It feels like it takes too much to get through the information, and it's not as clear as I feel like booking.com is, or other sites like booking.com. So that's what I look at in terms of hotels. And so I'll sort by anything that's 9+ stars, And then I'll look at the different reviews and kind of figure out what that says. And so I'm looking at everything that's the highest quality and then has the best review, and kind of going from there to figure out where I want to stay, and also figure out where I want to stay, like what area. For me, I decide on what do I want to feel. And that's huge in any of my trips, whether it's short trip, or it's, I'm planning this months out in advance. What do I want to feel? So on this trip, I wanted to feel relaxed. I wanted to breathe. I wanted to not worry about transportation and how I'm going to get here and there, getting a taxi and all these different things. I wanted to be walking distance to a lot of things. I also wanted to be walking distance to good food because I love food. And part of this trip of me pouring into me was eating good food. So figuring out what works for you. But I also wanted to be remote. So again, that goes back to, I had two different things. I wanted to be close to everything, walking distance, but I also wanted to be remote from everything, which entailed me getting two different locations. So part of my time, I needed let's be in the mix of everything. And the other part, like, I want to be away from everyone, remote and in my own world, on my own secluded beach, living my best life. It didn't work out that way, but I did live my best life there. But that was my game plan. And that kind of goes back to a couple, again, I'll say it over and over and over. You got to be flexible. You got to go with the flow. When traveling last minute, the worst thing you could do traveling last minute, the very worst thing you could do traveling last minute is to have high expectations. Like when you have high expectations, you're setting yourself up for a really crappy trip. Whether it's last minute or not, you're setting yourself for a crappy trip, especially last minute because nothing's planned. And if it's planned, you're planning it as you go. So it's really not advantageous to have the high expectations when you're working on the fly. So I always say when you are traveling last minute, ditch the high expectations because your feelings will get hurt because things will go any which way. So really expect the unexpected when traveling last minute. And again, be open to the flow because things happen. You have to be able to shift. I think that's a huge mindset when traveling last minute, is being open, being patient, being open to shifting quickly, and being okay this is what I thought I was going to be doing, but this place is not open now, so now I need to shift to something else. And being comfortable with just going with the flow. I think that's a mentality you have to have. You have to be flexible and open to travel last minute. I think if that's not who you are as a person, this may not be for you. And, sometimes it is expensive traveling last minute. So if budget, you totally can find budget options, but if budget is a situation, I would say this also may not always be for you, but I'm not saying that it can't be for you because this situation was hella cheap one day out of me traveling. And so there are options that can happen to keep that in there, but you got to be flexible. You got to be open to anything and happening. And anything happening for me was I booked this retreat location and this was going to be fire. This was going to be amazing. I was going to do this cacao ceremony, the Tez Mezcal, which is this beautiful ceremony. Like you're going into this little dome area that's it's supposed to be going into the womb of the mother. And they put these volcanic rocks in there. And it's essentially a sweat lodge. And it is a spiritual experience. You're chanting, you're singing, you're sweating, your emotions are coming out left and right. And I loved it. But what I didn't love was the location that I was staying at or was supposed to stay at. It wasn't anything that they advertised. They advertised they had Wi-Fi. They advertised that they had all these different things. And I'm like, this right here, oh my God, I just got bamboozled. And I got bamboozled in the sense that they had wanted me to pay 3 nights in advance. It was a 3-night minimum, and they wanted me to pay 3 nights in advance. But because I was traveling late and last minute, they're like, oh, we'll just put a deposit down. And so I put a deposit down. So I had to put in it. What worked out in my favor was I put a deposit down, which happened to be the same amount of one of the ceremonies. So when I got there and looked at the place, I was like, yo, I'm sorry. Like, I can't. I cannot stay here. This is not what your website says this. The pictures say that. And everything I'm looking around, this ain't it. And so I was able to get out of just paying one. I just had to pay one night versus the 3 nights, which was great. So again, one of those last minute situations, had I paid in advance or had I booked in advance, I might have already paid the 3 nights and I would have been stuck in a place that would have felt like hell for me, which I didn't because I was traveling last minute and I was able to negotiate. The other thing about traveling last minute is if they still have the availability, places are willing to negotiate with you. I was able to negotiate a couple different things just because I was traveling last minute and had built that relationship. And it's better to have someone in your place versus not have anyone at all. So that's one of the perks about traveling last minute is some places are willing to negotiate with you. Not all, but some are willing to negotiate with you. The other thing I didn't mention earlier, and I know I'm kind of going back and forth, is in talking about pricing, is traveling midweek. I found when you try to leave on a Friday, Saturday, or leaving on a Sunday from the location, like when you're traveling in like the weekend time frame, just any day of the weekend, I find the prices more expensive. So if you are able to travel like on a Tuesday and come back on a Thursday or Wednesday or whatever, or anytime that's in the middle of the week, the prices are cheaper. Prices are often cheaper for the hotels. Prices are often cheaper for the flights. That being said, I love a good Airbnb. And finding the right Airbnb is important because just like everywhere else, people be lying about things. And it kind of sucks when you think you're going to have this amazing trip and you're like, oh, this ain't it. This ain't where I was planning to go. So I don't book Airbnbs that don't have any reviews, period. If there's no review, I'm not booking because you don't know what you're getting. You don't have anyone can co-sign that this looks like it says it looks. These people are legit. Not saying someone's going to steal your money or anything like that. I mean, it hasn't happened to me. I'm knocking on wood, but you just don't know. So I feel like I will never book an Airbnb that doesn't have a review. I also recognize that Airbnb scores, like someone could ding you. Like the Airbnb rating really matters. Like you could either rate them a 4, that brings the rating down extraordinarily low. So keep that in mind. Like unless it was horrific, you really should only be giving 5s because that really affects the business. And a lot of people just don't know that. They think, oh, if it wasn't miraculous, I'm not giving them a 5. Well, giving them a 4 is like giving them a C. Or let's see when that's not what you probably were thinking. But that being said, I don't stay anywhere in Airbnb unless it has at least a 4.8, maybe a 4.7, but 4.8 and above. Because when it's at 4.7 and below, that means a lot of things went wrong. For kicks, I'll look through to see what those things are wrong, to see if there was something that was, maybe they've only have 2 or 3 reviews and there was someone who just had one really off situation and gave them a low rating. But most times it'll be something like communication was bad, the place didn't look like what it was supposed to, it wasn't clean. I look for those things. I look to see how clean is a place. What was the host helpful in getting you, places to go? Was that host helpful in like being flexible, checking in, checking out, and what's there to do? Were there any other issues like, oh, the AC is wrong? Or another thing I look for is there construction in the building? Or is there construction nearby? Is there something going on that would make you not want to see, like someone not feeling safe? They might feel like this is the best location, but if everyone's saying, love the Airbnb, but the location was not so safe, I love that. And so I like Airbnbs. I am a huge fan of Airbnb, and they just came out with all these new things where they have new categories where you can look for places based on if you want a campfire, if you want something that's near the beach, if you want a winery, you want a farmhouse, you want something they have this category called Oh My God, OMG, and these off-the-wall amazing places. And so I love that they have that. They also have this thing called like split something. It's air split or split something. but it helps you find 2 different Airbnbs if you want to split your time as well. The other thing they have is air cover. So they cover if things aren't the way that the person said that it would be, and all these different things. And so it's one of the most inclusive in terms of warranties, or if something goes wrong, they cover you. And I think more than any other, I don't think any other competitors are doing it. And that's something they just released and stuff like that. And so I was kind of like, I love you even more, Airbnb. Shout out to you. So we've talked about air, we've talked about location, we've talked about finding your destination. And then the last most important thing is packing. When you're traveling last minute, it is hella easy to forget something. Like, I usually have a bag that's generally already packed with the basic things I always know I need. There's always toothbrush, there's always toothpaste, there's a shower cap, there's my sunblock, there's deodorant, there's my yoga mat, which I did bring my yoga mat with me. So I always have certain things that are always in my bag. As a woman, there's always tampons and things like that, because you never know when Aunt Flo is going to come and join you on the trip with you. So making sure you have a bag that just has the basic in it's great. Having a packing list of things that you just generally need to know that you want to have, and having that just in your bag, that's kind of the checklist of making sure, did I bring my computer cord? Did I bring my iPhone charger? Did I bring, underwear and little things like that? Having that list that's always in your bag and preparing that in advance, it's really helpful when you're traveling last minute. But if you don't have that, best thing to do is not to pack so heavy, because you're traveling last minute. So, hey, this is a perfect time to sometimes to upgrade your wardrobe, because you're traveling last minute and you may need something new and improved. If that's not what you want to do, plan out your clothes and know that, look for places that may have a washer. So again, why I like Airbnbs is they have washers. A lot of them have washer and dryers in it. So if I need to wash something, I was set, especially with your washing your bathing suits and stuff like that. That's something to consider. And so that's what I got for you. I hope this was helpful to someone. I love last minute trips. I feel like they can go wrong in so many different ways, but they can go so right in so many different ways, and have been some of the best trips I've ever had. On that note, I will see you guys next week. Ciao. Thanks for joining us this week on the Hello Well with Danielle show. Make sure to visit our website, hellowellwithdanielle.com, where you can subscribe to our show on iTunes, Spotify, and Amazon Music and never miss an episode. Also, you can follow us on social media at Hello Well with Danielle on Facebook and Instagram, and Hello Well Danny on Twitter. And if you like hella love the show and got some good nuggets out of it, know that I'm not too proud to ask for you to please leave a rating or review on iTunes so that we can continue to expand our reach and help other women of color. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I hope to see you next week. Ciao.